Man, all these Dale Juniors, Matt Kenseths, gotta be feeling really old watching all these young drivers win every week. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric. Welcome to this week's episode of Out of the Groove. Got a decent amount of stuff to talk about, which is actually kind of surprising given we just came from Pocono. And of course, Pocono race itself wasn't a super interesting race. Not a lot of big highlights from throughout the race for the most part. And their biggest thing was when Jimmy Johnson lost his brakes heading into turn one and hit the wall really hard. Was luckily able to walk away from that wreck seemingly unscathed. Jamie McMurray was his car caught on fire in the same incident. So other than that, it was your typical Pocono race, not super duper eventful. But the big thing coming out of it was the final restart and the final handful of laps in this race, where we saw a crazy battle between Kyle Busch, Ryan Blaney, and then later Kevin Harvick. There was a caution pretty late in the race, only a handful of laps to go. The debate was whether they'd come in for tires, for 2 tires, for 4 tires, or no tires. Track position had been very important all day. And Kyle Busch, the 18 car, who had basically dominated most of the race, was probably the best car all race long, consistently chose to stay out to try and keep his track position. Keep in mind, everybody, Kyle Busch is working with a new filling crew chief this week, and he will be for the next 3 weeks as Adam Stevens serves his suspension, so that might have played into the ultimate result for Kyle Busch this weekend. So after leading the most laps in the race, Kyle Busch, I believe, was the only driver to stay out. A couple guys took 2 tires behind him, and then the rest of the field took 4. He managed to hold the lead for a while, but Ryan Blaney, the first car on 4 tires on the restart, managed to get up to him in what was a very eventful lap or so of battling back and forth, some contact, some really aggressive blocking. Ryan Blaney was ultimately able to skirt by the 18, who then fell back to like 9th place, I think is where he finished. Ryan Blaney gets his first career win, now not even 2 years into his career. Great for him. First win for Wood Brothers since Trevor Bayne won back in Daytona a few years ago. And speaking of a few years ago, this season's following a very similar trend that we saw in 2011. 2011, I guess you could say, was kind of like a miniature youth movement for NASCAR, but in that year we saw 5 drivers get their first career wins. It started when Trevor Bayne won the Daytona 500, then we saw Regan Smith win at Darlington. We had David Reagan win at Daytona in the summer. Who else got wins? Paul Menard at Indy that year. And then, of course, Marcos Ambrose, the road course master. So far in 2017, we've already had 3 drivers get their first wins of their careers. Stenhouse at Talladega, Austin Dillon at Charlotte, and now Ryan Blaney at Pocono. And while so far none of these 3 drivers that have gotten wins this year are rookies, they are still pretty young drivers, all of them only a few years into their career. But what's slightly different from Ricky Stenhouse and Austin Dillon's first career wins, which kind of felt like they were, lightning striking, not like it's impossible for him to get a win, but that it was definitely unexpected. Ryan Blaney has won a few stages this year. He's led a lot of laps. He has had some bad luck lately, which is why he's kind of further back in points. I think he was actually outside the top 16 if the chase were to start. He was outside of the playoffs coming into this weekend, but not anymore thanks to that win. And the difference that I'm trying to say about Ryan Blaney's win is I get the impression that he could get 2 or 3 more wins this year. I wouldn't expect that, but if he won another race this year, I wouldn't be too surprised. And the reason I'm relating this to 2011 is because 2011 we had 5 first-time winners, which just, we haven't seen that at all in any other season in recent history. But the reason I bring it up is because 2017, we already have 3 first-time winners, and we have a handful of drivers that I think are very close to getting their first wins. We all know about Chase Elliott now. He's in his 2nd year. He made the chase last year. He's looking like he's probably going to make the playoffs this year. He's been really close a few times. It's only a matter of time till he gets a win. And then some of the rookies. Eric Jones finished 3rd this weekend at Pocono. He's had top 5 cars at a few racetracks this year. And Daniel Suarez has been a little bit more inconsistent, but remember, he is still on Joe Gibbs Racing, which is a superstar AAA team, I guess, in NASCAR, so anything is possible. So basically what I'm saying, if those 3 drivers do get wins at some point this season, which isn't completely impossible, I don't think, we would break that record from 2011, and I think that would be honestly really great for the sport. Because we talked about it on this show, and it's been circled throughout the NASCAR community, we all realize, we can all see the writing on the wall, and it's been hitting us in the face the last couple of years. The Jeff Gordon, Carl Edwards, Tony Stewart, Dale Earnhardt Jr. next year, and in the next few years, we're going to see probably like Matt Kenseth, Jimmy Johnson, maybe some of these other guys start to retire. Greg Biffle's gone. There's a lot of superstars that have begun to retire from a sport that they have for a long time been the most recognizable faces in. Just a lot of the most recognizable names from the sports, the ones you still see in commercials more than other drivers, are no longer racing. And so NASCAR desperately has needed these younger drivers, specifically the Chase Elliott's, the Ryan Blaney's, I would say, the Daniel Suarez's, the Eric Jones, the Stenhouse's, the Austin Ty Dillons. They need those drivers to start to really make a name for themselves. And this year, whether it be by luck in the case of Austin Dillon in a way, or via having a really strong car and potentially being a real contender driver like Ryan Blaney, you know, it's so far worked out pretty well. So personally, I think that's good for the sport. I think it's necessary for the sport because NASCAR can't continue to rely on the heavy names, like they can't rely on Richard Petty's and Dale Earnhardt's and the popularity of those and Jeff Gordon's. They can't rely on the popularity of drivers from 20, 30, 40 years ago to continue to keep the sport in people's minds. NASCAR can't become a sport that relies purely on nostalgia because I think there are some sports like that are fading in popularity that are starting to kind of become that way. Like you look at the most popular sports in America, the NFL, football, you know, NBA basketball, both those sports are popular now. People are caring about the athletes that are really going at it now, you know? I'd say baseball is kind of becoming more of a nostalgic sport. Nobody's paying as much attention, I think, to the athletes now. I mean, there's guys like Aaron Judge who came out of nowhere. There's people know who Bryce Harper, Mike Trout, Jose Altuve, you know, all these guys, Clayton Kershaw, everyone knows who they are, but in the end, I feel like baseball is still relying on the, you know, big names of the past. Everyone remembering like, oh, I used to go to ball games as a boy. I'm going to take my son to a ball game. I think that's the only reason baseball is still as popular as it is, and it's a shame. And I don't want NASCAR to become the same way. I don't want new generations of NASCAR fans to just sit there growing up like, oh, my dad watched Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Gordon race in the 90s. Like, man, racing sounds so cool, because that's just not going to last. Modern fans of NASCAR need modern drivers to latch on to be able to follow, to be able to really support for a long period of time now, and that will be what propels NASCAR further into the many decades, hopefully, that it carries on. I got a little off topic there, but basically, you know, congratulations to Ryan Blaney. I think it was I don't want to say it was a long time coming, because he's only been in the sport about a year and a half now, but he's been strong at times last year, and definitely at times this year. I think this is just the first of many for Ryan Blaney, especially in that 21 car. Moving on to the other big thing, I guess I'm probably going to spend the rest of this episode talking about. I don't have as much to talk about as I thought I did. I get asked these questions a lot, you know, who's going to make the chase, who's going to make the playoffs, whatever it is, who's going to be the Final Four, who's going to be the champion. I think it was last week, about how I thought Jimmy Johnson, Kyle Larson, and Martin Truex Jr. were the three clear favorites at this point in the season. I still think that's true. But now, as we're more than halfway through the regular season of NASCAR, I think it might be important to kind of take a look at the chase or the playoff bubble as it is right now and look at some of the drivers on either side that are pretty close, and maybe talk about who has the best chances going forward. If we actually look at the playoff points right now, when we factor in the drivers who have wins and that are automatically in, we see that the first driver out of the chase right now, which would be 17th, is Matt Kenseth. 16th, just a handful of points ahead of him, is Joey Logano. 15th is Clint Bowyer, and we look a little bit further back, I think 18th is Eric Jones. 19th, I think, is Daniel Suarez. You look a little further back, 20th is Dillon, but he's moved forward because of his wins. You have Dale Earnhardt Jr. back there. Some other pretty big names. When we look at the chase bubble, Joey Logano is currently 3 points ahead of Matt Kenseth for that last position. Now remember, Joey Logano did get a win this year, but it was encumbered because they failed inspection, so it does not count to automatic admission into the playoffs the way they should all be counted. So Joey is currently on the bubble and in a pretty tight spot. Also worth mentioning, just ahead of him is Clint Bowyer. He's only 10 points ahead of Matt Kenseth, so those are three, I guess you can call them, Joey Logano's a veteran, three veteran race car drivers that have all proven they know how to win races that are going to be probably fighting each other for those last handful of playoff spots. Because after 17th place Matt Kenseth, it's a pretty big gap back to Eric Jones, Trevor Bayne, Daniel Suarez, those other guys I mentioned. In fact, after Matt Kenseth, it's 37 points back to Eric Jones, which is the next highest car in points. And I don't want to dive back into the whole me complaining about how important wins are. I don't want it to be like that, but I'm looking at the points right now, and I just got to point something out. I named those drivers: Clint Bowyer, Joey Logano, Matt Kenseth, and actually Denny Hamlin I could probably throw into the mix as well, are all pretty tight on the bubble right now. Still halfway through, but still pretty tight on the bubble. There's a ton of drivers that got those wins earlier this year that are behind them in points. Drivers behind Bowyer, Logano, Kenseth: Kurt Busch, who won the Daytona 500, he's behind them. Ricky Stenhouse. Ryan Newman is behind them. Austin Dillon, we've already talked about Austin Dillon. He's back in like 20th in points. He's behind them. But all those drivers will be leaped into the top 10 in points because they got those wins. And this is, just again, why I don't think the winning you're in is fair. I don't want to pull up the same graphic I showed a couple weeks ago, but the winning you're in, it's just goofy. It takes away from the most consistent, the actual best overall drivers. The way other sports look at the regular season, they look at who had the most wins, who had the least losses, and they stack them up by how good their team was. That's how NASCAR should do it. They should look at who had the best finishes throughout the year, who did the best in each stage, if they want to stick with that, you know. They should look at that. They shouldn't look at drivers like Austin Dillon, who's 20th in points, which is actually the highest he's probably been all season. Drivers like Austin Dillon, who, let's be real, was very fortunate to happen to catch that win at Charlotte. They shouldn't weigh that so heavily that now Austin Dillon, despite being 20th in points, well behind a lot of these drivers who've run consistently better than him, they shouldn't allow him to now be like 9th in points heading into the playoffs. That's not right to me. It's my same problem with like college football, where they have like the ranking system where they go in and they're like, oh, well, let's see, this team beat OU, so that was a pretty good win. Okay, they're jumped up to like 5th ranking. This team, oh, they lost to Southwestern Ohio State Tech University, like, oh, that's a pretty bad loss. They should be down on like 50th or something. Like, it's so subjective, and I don't like that NASCAR is becoming more of a wild card in terms of rankings, where drivers and teams that really I don't have any business being in the top 10 of points are in the top 10 of points because of one big win they had against Ohio State. Again, I don't want to rant about this any longer. I think you guys know where I stand on this. I like it when they reward consistency, like drivers who finish in the top 10 each week, and run top 10, top 5 each week. Not drivers that run 20th each week and then win a race on fuel mileage. I'm not a fan of the win in your own system. I've said that enough. That's gonna be typed on my grave, probably. That's about all the subject stuff I have to talk about. NASCAR is gonna be at Michigan this next weekend. Another big track. I guess it's just that time of year. People always ask me to give my picks for the following weekend. I always kind of forget to do that, but for the next weekend, if I had to pick anyone at Michigan, I would lean Chase Elliott. I know I was talking about first-time winner, guys. Chase Elliott's been strong in Michigan in the past. He's been good at kind of the big tracks. He ran pretty well at Pocono this last weekend. I think Chase Elliott will be a guy to watch out for. But other than that, I am done here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for commenting, liking, sharing, all that great stuff. You can check out my Patreon, my Twitter, merchandise store. I always pick up this hat. You can get Out of the Groove W Cup Series stuff. Speaking of W Cup Series, we got a pretty wild race coming up here just in a few days, I guess, by the time this is released. And also, speaking of other videos on my channel, if you haven't seen it, I uploaded a little Matt Kenseth and me type horror movie trailer. I'll put that right there. Oh, my bad, right there. Wow, I'm so disoriented. Right there. You can click on that. That was a fun little skit video I did. But other than that, that's all I have. Thanks guys for watching as always. Thanks for all the support. It means a ton to me. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you continue to enjoy this series. I'll be back next week, every Thursday as always. So see you later, guys.